and welcome. My name is Meenakshi Iyer, and I am a leadership coach. I'm a technologist turned leadership coach and founder and principal at Nostra Solutions and Services LLC, which is a boutique people development firm dedicated to unpacking leadership at the messy middle. It's been a while since I have met all of you here via LinkedIn Live, and we are also live on Facebook and YouTube. And I'm back here to have a very, very important conversation, actually continue one of our conversations from our annual World of Work conference from a couple of years ago, titled Burnout, the Silent Pandemic. And we are continuing the conversation today from one of our guest speakers who joined us for a follow-up event that year in 2022, because we are continuing to see that mental well-being, emotional well-being, and burnout continue to be burning issues, no pun intended, for all of us, regardless of the ways of working that we engage with. Whether we are self-employed, whether we work for an organization, or doesn't matter what industry or what kind of work we do. Things around us, more often than not, seem to be out of control. And we are all struggling with it in different ways. And this was a conversation that I started with my collaborator, conference co-host, and dear friend, Tiffany Castano. And we've been co-hosting the annual World of Work conference since 2021. And this was a conversation we had around Burnout, the Silent Pandemic in 2022. And so today I want to bring back our guest speaker from before, Sally Clarke, and who's joining us all the way from Australia. Welcome, Sally. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's so wonderful to be with you again, Meenakshi. Thank you for inviting me back.
Absolutely. And I also want to take a moment to welcome everyone here. Please share in the chat where you're joining us from. And what about burnout and well-being? What is it that you would like to learn more about? And if you have any questions, please put that in the chat. And Sally and I met actually via LinkedIn a couple of years ago. And it was actually your research, the State of Workplace Burnout study that was, I think it had just then been published. And that was also thanks to Al and Leanne Elliott, Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture podcast. And that's how I heard you on the podcast. And that's how we met. And the timing didn't work out for us because we had just finished our conference, Tiffany and I, and then we brought you in. So that's how we met. And we met you as someone who, I know you have your own story with burnout, and you've shared that with us in the past. But you are an author, you run your own podcast, you're a solopreneur, and you live on 2 different continents. And there's a lot to your story and the work that you do as a well-being expert and researcher. So lovely to have you here today. And I know you're continuing to do that important work, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So with that, Sally, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey into this space.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. You've covered quite a lot there already. So I am Australian born. I'm a former finance lawyer who had a pretty catastrophic burnout myself coming up to 15 years ago. That was, at the time, I barely knew or acknowledged the word burnout. I collapsed at an airport, and that was the moment after years of chronic stress that I was forced to acknowledge that something wasn't right. I was in a lucky position to be able to have the option to quit, which I did. And I sort of went on a spiritual journey, became a yoga and meditation teacher, moved to Morocco for a while, lived in Portugal for a while, teaching retreats. And I noticed at a certain point that a lot of the people who were attending these retreats were asking quite existential questions and dealing with a lot of stress too. And I often got the question, how did you do this? How did you escape? Eventually it got me thinking about what is this burnout thing? What happened to me? And I think particularly, how can I help other people avoid it? Through that research, that's what turned into the 2 books that I wrote, Protect Your Spark, which is about prevention for individuals, Relight Your Spark, which is about healing and evolving after burnout for individuals. But this research also uncovered that a lot of the causes of burnout are organizational and societal. So these are layers of root causes of the chronic stress that leads to complete burnout that I think are not focused on a lot in the current narrative. We tend to talk a lot about, individuals, how can we make people more resilient in these, often quite toxic work environments. And it became very clear to me that that's just, it's honestly, it feels a little bit inhumane. The former kind of human rights lawyer in me as well is kind of like, this doesn't feel fair, when there's things that we can do at an organizational level that can really change how we work and reduce that prevailing sense of chronic stress. We can actually have a really huge impact, I think, in reducing the incidence of burnout. So this has led to the work that I now do at Infinite Potential, and this research, which is very sort of organizationally focused.
Yeah. I loved how you built that bridge from working at an individual level to really starting to focus on the causes for burnout. And the World Health Organization actually calls it a phenomenon, but it has a disease classification.
Yes.
And I find that so interesting. And then it's like an occupational phenomenon. That's how it's described.
Yes.
In the disease classification standard.
Exactly. And I think it's a really helpful one. It's a question I get a lot, is how can we say that burnout is just about work when we have one body, we have this nervous system that deals with stress. It doesn't differentiate between where that stress is coming from. But I think the World Health Organization has actually given us an incredibly powerful and important opportunity by defining the term burnout as an occupational phenomenon. It empowers us to make the focus really on work. What can we do about work and how we work, how we even think about work, how we legislate about work and labor rights, to change the dials there so that burnout occurs less. And I certainly agree that, we all experience chronic stress in different forms, and our body doesn't discern between those different forms. But I feel like there's a lot that we can change for humanity and for each of us as individuals and as a collective when we start to redress some of the fundamental things that are just not working about how we work.
Absolutely. And we are way beyond that point where burnout is made out to be an individual issue. And exactly like you said, there's so much focus on fixing the person as opposed to fixing the environment and changing the environment in such a way that it doesn't even happen in the first place, right? So with that, I wanted to start off this conversation around I know there's research this year's research that's underway at the moment. So tell us about how you got involved with the State of Workplace Burnout study. And I know that's in the 5th year this year?
It is, yeah. So we're currently, the survey is open for the 5th year of this really amazing research. And honestly, it was kind of like how we connected through Al and Leanne, incredible people in this space. Friends of mine, friends from law school, knew a person in Sydney, Dr. John Chan, who happened to be an organizational psychologist who was doing this research. And at the time I was writing my books, they said, you guys have to talk. And we did. And since then, it's been, feels like a very, a very aligned way for me to sort of be able to really actively pursue that passion that I have of helping leaders to understand burnout better and to understand these root causes. So, sometimes I describe it as like downstream, you're seeing maybe 40% of your workforce in burnout. And last year in our study, we saw burnout is at about 38%. So it's an incredible number of people, around 2 in 5 who are actually in burnout at that time. And as I said, we've got the survey open for this year. So we're really curious to see in the report, which will be published in February, how we're tracking, how that's going. We have seen it increase over those 4 years that we've been doing the study. Where is that heading? But I think, for us to be able to really use this research to empower leaders with insight into the upstream causes that are leading to that downstream outcome, because there's a lot of, I think there is a lot of support that can be offered to people in the recovery phase of burnout. But my goal is to intervene way earlier so that we're actually seeing that trajectory change away from burnout as this kind of inevitable outcome of work to really the exception to the rule.
Yeah. That is so fascinating. And I love that this study is longitudinal.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Tell
us more. So tell us what stood out for you from last year's research, for example. You pointed out one thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, there's a lot, because firstly we have we look at sort of intersectionalities as well. So we're using the infinite potential burnout scale to measure the 3 dimensions of burnout each year to identify whether people are in burnout. And so that's a very robust way of gathering those figures. And I do want to just underscore that, there's plenty of sort of, single question, do you feel burnt out right now? And, for a lot of people, the feeling would be, yeah, but whether you actually qualify as being, in burnout, according to the definition, it's a different matter. So last year, burnout had actually stabilized. It tracked at 38%, which was around the same figure as the year before. So that was, to some extent, that's, I think, an improvement if we're seeing that sort of stabilization of burnout. Obviously, we want to see it track down. Unfortunately, what we did see alongside of that was a significant jump in the gender gap in burnout. So in the previous year, women were experiencing 38% of women were in burnout compared to 33% of men. In this year's findings, men had actually decreased to 30%, and for women, it had jumped to 42%. So that gap has gone from 5% to 12%. So in this year's research, we've actually added in a number of questions to help us understand what is causing that gender gap. Why has that jump occurred? Why are women experiencing burnout not just at a higher rate, but this kind of growing rate compared to men? So that was a figure that not only startled us, but we haven't really been able to, we've had a lot of conversations around why that might be, but we're really excited to see this year's research hopefully really give us some crystal clear insight into what's driving that. I think another thing that we were really interested to see was that, and we looked at loneliness in the workplace as well. We used the UCLA 3-point loneliness scale. And a key finding that we had was that burnout, people who are experiencing burnout are not more likely to be lonely. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around. People who are lonely are not more likely to be in burnout, but people who are experiencing burnout are twice as likely to be experiencing loneliness as well. So there's some really interesting things I think we can say about that. And it's particularly as loneliness is such a prevalent and important topic for us as a society, but we're starting to see this conversation happening more in relation to the workplace. So I think this year we're also looking to sort of extend that research and understand what it is, what are the factors that are driving loneliness in the workplace, and how can leaders redress this? Because we are humans, we are deeply social creatures. It is a basic psychological need for us to have that sense of connection, and work is the place that we spend most of our time as humans. So I think if we can really help leaders to identify, small changes that can be made to also redress loneliness in the workplace, that also can have potentially a really strong effect in terms of societal ramifications, but also, organizational outcomes. So I think those are a couple of things that stand out to me. There's a lot. Obviously, the report from last year, it's big. We've got quite a few key insights. And another that I'll just finish with is we looked at a demographic from the work time reduction population. So it's an organization based out of Canada that we collaborated with, and we are again this year. And so we had this amazing opportunity to compare the general population against people who work in companies that have shifted to reduced working time modality. That's primarily a 4-day week, but for some it's a 9-day fortnight. Yeah. And the difference in burnout rate was 42% for the general population and 9% among those companies. And our takeaway there, I think, is that it's not just about lopping off time and thinking that that's the simple factor that will somehow just immediately, dissolve burnout. But what we see with those companies is they go through a 6 to 18 month preparation sort of phase before they shift to that work time reduction modality, which really goes through this huge process of hygiene so that those companies are able to allow people to work 20% left at the same pay and make that feasible for them. So they go through these processes that actually redress a lot of the root causes of burnout inherently in that shift. So I think, for companies for businesses for whom that is actually a possibility, it's, it might feel unfeasible for a lot of companies, but I think it is something that's very much part of the vernacular these days, the 4-day week. It's a really interesting way of perhaps, a lens you can use to have your company become a lot more healthy and thereby reduce burnout.
Yeah. Wow, you covered so much ground there. And I just remembered when you talked about work time reduction, I remember Joe O'Connor, right? He connected with me on LinkedIn, and it's via you because I think we had interacted on some of the same research and things like that. So
cool.
This is like a global collaboration happening.
It really is. We're covering every corner of the planet.
Absolutely. And, when you talked about loneliness, I'm sure you've heard the US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy.
Yeah.
There was a declaration that came out, an advisory that he put out, which says that loneliness increases the risk of premature death by 26% and isolation by 29%.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the soundbite that keeps coming back up is it's equivalent to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
Exactly.
In terms of your lifespan. So that's the impact that's at stake.
It's a brilliant insight, Meenakshi. I think Dr. Murthy's work in this space is so important, and to have used his position to be able to shed this important light on loneliness as this kind of societal invisible menace. We're talking about burnout as the silent pandemic, and I think to some extent loneliness has some similar qualities. Yes. And there's also one thing that I think they share in common is a sense of shame. And this is why it can sometimes be confronting for, when we talk to leaders in workplaces, often the word burnout, it's kind of a bit of a hot potato. We don't want to talk about it because we don't want to acknowledge the truth of what's happening. It can be scary. And I think in some cases, the idea of talking about loneliness in the workplace as well feels like it's taboo somehow. But I think, we're really starting to see these terms and the kind of conversation become much more normalized. We're seeing, leaders who are using their power in a really amazing way as role models to shift the narrative, to be more vulnerable, and to really look at, not to create a doomsday scenario of everything is bad and look at how these statistics, look at how bad it is, but how can we use this data to create better outcomes? How can we create this shift and start to, I would love for like next generation and the generation after, for work to be something that empowers, that energizes them, that is something that is a sustainable experience through their lives as well, so that it is something that actually up-levels and uplifts humans and humanity rather than demoralizing and exploiting us. And I think, I do, as difficult as it can sometimes be to find hope at the moment, it's that's certainly a factor that's giving me a lot of hope that we are starting to see that those conversations be had more openly and publicly.
Yeah, so well said. What are your hopes for this year's research? So folks that are watching, that'll watch the replay, what do you want us to do?
Please do the survey. It's one of those things that I think, firstly, people think, well, I don't think I'm in burnout, so I don't need to do it. Everyone can participate. Everyone's voice matters. However you're doing at work, however you're feeling, if you take the 10 to 15 minutes, it's actually, I've heard a lot of feedback from people saying it's a really helpful self-reflection tool. So while it's not an individual diagnostic for burnout, but it is a really beautiful opportunity perhaps to reflect on how work is working for you right now. And so really, if everyone who's watching does the survey, shares it with one or two people, or perhaps within their network, so that we can really generate this really substantial data set and create some really interesting insights that, again, can, you know, empower leaders to make different choices, that can help anyone in an organization who wants to make change have that information, that data ready to be able to do that. And obviously, you know, once you've done the survey, feel welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. But also stay tuned for the report in February, and perhaps think about whether you'd like your organization to take part in the study next year as well, because it is something that we do offer each year, that organizations can participate, and larger organizations, if there's sufficient data gathered, they can also have, you know, access to their own report and sort of really benefit from those specific insights as well. Yeah, so I think key message, please click on that link and do the survey. You won't regret it.
Thank you for that, Sally. Yeah, and we'll be sharing that in the show notes, and we'll put it in the chat as well. So the survey and the work that you do through the State of Workplace Burnout survey study, the main segment that can benefit from this is organizations, right?
Yes, I think, I mean, it's interesting because it's individuals who experience burnout, and it's individuals who do the survey and help us sort of generate this data. And I think this is why we're still, that lens is still shifting in terms of burnout from as an individual thing to actually something that happens for organizational and societal reasons. Correct. So I think, you know, it's might sound a bit naive to say, but I think in principle everyone can benefit directly or indirectly from this research. And certainly what we're looking to do is to generate insights for leaders, because I think a lot of leaders also think, well, of course I want to reduce burnout for my people. Of course I want to improve my organization. I want us to have a healthy organization that attracts and keeps great people naturally, but I don't know where to start. And it feels like this big, nebulous, overwhelming thing. And I don't have, where's my on-ramp here. So what we really look to do is to help leaders start a conversation or identify where is the low-hanging fruit. What are the simple things that we can change in our organization that will actually start to generate some positivity and momentum? We make these small changes. And this year, we're also part of the survey is around the concept of workplace sustainability, which is a framework that we use at Infinite Potential to help organizations look at these 5 dimensions of sort of workplace sustainability that help them identify these measures that they can take. So we look at protection from harm, which is the basic sort of protections from physical and psychosocial risk. Human leadership. So we look at the leadership capabilities. I know this is a big passion of yours too. I mean, actually, that how are leaders ready to meet the needs of a new generation of employees, these needs and expectations as they shift. We look at people-centered structures. So what's job design like? Do we have the structures and systems in place that really optimize and make effective and empowering how we work together? Team connection, which is pretty self-explanatory, but looking at, you know, how psychologically safe is the team environment, how collaborative and connective and innovative our teams, and the tweaks that we can make to up-level that. And finally, personal growth. So that can look quite different from one organization to the next. It might be that there's, you know, sort of clear career advancement prospects. It might be that learning and development is really built into the workday. So it's not something that you're expected to do outside of work or as an add-on, but it's really a component of your role. And we see very strongly that this is something that builds a real sense of loyalty, because not only are you upskilling, and improving the know-how of your employees, it's an investment in the organization by investing in the minds and souls of the employees there. So those are just some of the sort of ways that the data that we're gathering really to be able to help leaders. So say, let's start here and see how this works. Let's start this conversation with these people. Let's look at the job design. Have we had to, for example, someone leaves and we have to replace them with 2 people? What does that tell us about this organization and the expectations that we have of people, the lack of
Yeah.
role clarity. There's so much that can be done, and I think sometimes
Absolutely.
that kind of paralyzes us. So we're trying to just give like that sense of clarity and helping leaders identify clear starting points and to start that journey, because that's a thing as well. Sorry, I'm ranting.
No, not at all.
It's a thing with burnout. If there was a switch that we could flick and burnout ended, we would all have done that by now. It really is something that's a little bit more complex, and it's an ongoing thing. It's kind of like the journey of self-awareness, right? We can't just flick a switch and suddenly we're self-aware. It really takes consistent, ongoing effort. And perhaps a little hard work at the outset, but it's once you have that momentum, it is something that becomes to a large extent self-sustaining and sort of propagates itself forward. So again, a bit of a hopeful note perhaps, but that's who I am, a realistic optimist.
That's fantastic. And I loved the way you articulated the what, how, and why of the why, what, and how of the survey, and what happens once how to leverage the report once it comes out. And I love this phrase, how is work working for you? I really, really love that. And there's so much to be explored in that space. And the fact that anybody can take the survey and add value to your study. And then once the report is out, you said February, is there a certain date or?
Not yet to be fixed. We usually do it sort of mid-February. There'll be an in-person launch here in Australia, but also we'll do an online one. So we're excited to see everyone. It's a global study.
Yeah.
But we'll aim to do a time frame, probably morning Australia, so everyone in North America can also join in for the online launch. And of course, everyone can access download for free the report once it's launched. And please feel welcome to follow me on LinkedIn for updates on the specific timing too.
Yeah, that's great. As we begin to wrap up today's conversation, Sally, what are your parting thoughts?
Oh, that's a beautiful question, actually. I think it's, I have sort of three. One, if you're in burnout right now, you're not alone. And please take action. Talk to someone. The sooner, the better. If you're a leader in an organization and you're curious about how you can improve things, improve the quality of the water upstream, so we're not seeing burnout downstream, feel welcome to reach out and start that conversation. And to everyone, please do the survey. You really contributing to really key research. Your voice really matters to us, whoever you are, wherever you are. So please take part and be a part of the change.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Sally, and for doing this important work and making sure that work does work for all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to be a part of this process and to be able to support you in whatever little way I can. And I'll be definitely taking the survey.
Thank you, Meenakshi, and thank you again also for sharing your beautiful platform here and giving me the opportunity to share what we're doing. I really appreciate it, and your work in this space too. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. So folks, thank you so much for watching us live. And if you're going to catch the recording later, thank you for your time. The survey is open until the 15th of November, 2024. So roughly about a week or so from today. We'll be plugging in the link to the survey in the show notes. And if you have questions or if you want to learn more, you know where to find Sally. Connect with her on LinkedIn. And I'm going to put a plug in. So Tiffany and I are excited to welcome Sally back to our conference upcoming February. Stay tuned for the details. It's our 6th annual World of Work conference. And we are going to bring back the focus to mental well-being. So our theme is prioritizing mental well-being in a noisy world. And so we are so excited to have you back, Sally, joining us for the conference. And I really hope that we are able to learn more about that. The report comes out by then and we are able to hear more about it.
It will. I'll definitely be sharing the hot off the press insights from the report. And, I think that is such a powerful and important topic right now, and particularly the noisy world. I think for all of us right now that resonates deeply. So I'm excited to be a part of it and really looking forward to the conference next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And everyone, once again, thank you so much for your time. Take care, be well, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.